Welcome to episode 17 of Believe in TCU as part of the Believe Network. I'm Zion Trammell, and I'm joined today by Ian Napetian. And today we'll be talking TCU basketball, both men's and women's, as they started their season this week. We'll talk about their opening games and look ahead to the rest of the season, what our thoughts and expectations are this season. We're going to start things off with men's basketball. Ian, I don't know if you saw, but Shaquille O'Neal was in attendance for the men's first game of the season. Not for TCU, but for
Yep.
his son um, on uh, on Florida A&M. Did you catch that?
Yeah, definitely saw that he was in town. I think it's awesome that he was able to come to the game, see Shakir play a little bit. Unfortunately for Florida A&M, the game didn't go their way, but it was expected the way TCU's been prepping this season. I mean, it's obviously non-conference, but we've seen some really, some very different characters in the Schollmeyer with Shaq being there on Monday, then baby Gronk there on Tuesday. So very interesting stuff off the court for both the men's and women's basketball programs.
Yeah, and Spencer Dinwiddie of the Dallas Mavericks was there yesterday too, which was pretty cool. So we're
Yeah.
getting a lot of different people coming into Schollmeyer Arena. But we're going to start things off with the men's team. As I mentioned, they played Florida A&M on Monday. They won 105-59, a very convincing win for the Horned Frogs. Vashawn Alette was the leading scorer for TCU with 20 points off the bench, shooting 9 of 13. Frankie Collins had a good game with 14 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 steals. And then Ernest Uday picked up a double-double. Um, I was pretty happy with this performance. A couple years ago, we saw TCU kind of struggle in their first couple non-conference games, including a loss in the early going. But what were kind of your impressions from that game from this TCU team, and what can you expect moving forward?
Yeah, no. I mean, first of all, just kind of looking at the season in general, both for the men's and women's programs. I mean, for one, I'm just excited that college basketball is back. I think it's one of the best atmospheres, especially at TCU. It's a very different atmosphere than some of the other sports. I mean, obviously football is very fun too, but basketball being inside the Schollmeyer, you really get a feel for what that can be like and how that home court advantage really works, especially at TCU. But I guess for this game in general, first of all, so many new faces. I think that's the biggest thing. Whether you're a fan or someone covering the team, there's so many new faces with this team. You don't really have any starting returners outside of Ernest Uday Jr. But it's obviously huge that he came back because he's going to have to play a big role in this team, whether he's, you know, being one of the team's top performers, which hopefully he can continue working into that mold, but also being a big piece in that veteran leadership role too. But from this game specifically, the 3-point shooting was absolutely outstanding. In the first half, TCU with 11 threes, 11 out of 16 threes. Jace Posey was putting up some shots, which I was really surprised to see him hitting from beyond the arc. I think he had 3 threes of his own. He went 3 for 4, I want to say. And then just in general, I mean, this TCU team came out, looked really good from the get-go. Again, this is a team that prides themselves in the transition game, right? And it's something that Jamie Dixon's going to continue working on and continue really pushing throughout this season because that's what TCU's brand of basketball is. And they were also physical. I mean, again, they got a very dominant win over Florida A&M. It was expected, but we saw nothing less than what you would have wanted to see from TCU coming out in their first game of the season.
Absolutely, yeah, and you mentioned it. The three-point shooting was outstanding. Very, very pleased to see that. Last year, that was a bit of a struggle for this TCU team, was their ability to efficiently hit from beyond the arc, and they got a lot of open looks, sure, but it's still difficult to knock those down. And we saw that early and often for this TCU team. And yeah, there's a lot of new faces, so it's going to take some getting used to kind of figure out, who are some guys to watch out for. But they said continuously throughout the broadcast that Vashawn Alette could, they felt like that he could lead the team in scoring. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that. I really like the versatility that he brings on the offensive end, the way he was scoring on Monday. He's attacking the basket you know, pull up mid range off the pick and roll. He can also knock down the 3-pointer. So really seeing what he was able to do offensively was really fun to watch. And I'm super excited this season from Vashon Alette, what he's able to do for the Horned Frogs coming off the bench, maybe even starting. We'll see. Um, but I think, you mentioned Ernest Uday needs to, step up in a big role. And, but I also think Frankie Collins will be the guy that a lot of people are going to love. I think fans are really going to like Frankie Collins. We kind of got a glimpse of what he was able to do at Arizona State when TCU played Arizona State in the tournament. And I liked him then, and I really like him now that he's in purple. So, he shows a lot of leadership. He brings a lot more playmaking that was missed in previous seasons. His ability to distribute and find his open teammates, and he can also score as well. So those are the two guys for me that really stood out to me, and two people I'm really excited about this season.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, right? You mentioned kind of the physicality of Vashon Alette being able to drive to the basket, right? That's I think for me at least as a basketball fan, as somebody that watches primarily college basketball, I love it when players drive to the rim. I think you kind of lose a little bit of that in the NBA sometimes, right? It's obviously the game has changed; it's become such a perimeter game. But for a team like TCU that has never really been a team that prides itself in their 3-point shooting from beyond the arc or their perimeter play, I'm glad to see that at least in this early going and very early going, meaning the very first game of the season, that players are driving to the rim, they're being physical, because I think this team needs to be physical throughout the season, especially once you get to Big 12 conference play, which is undeniably the best basketball conference in the nation. I think really when you look at this conference, the top 5 teams in the conference are within the top 10 of the nation, right? So um, it's going to be important. Again, this is a very young team, so there's going to be ebbs and flows throughout the season. I'd like to think that this team's going to do really well, but obviously there's going to be hiccups, right? There's going to be times because this is a young team, right? You only have one returning starter from last year. We've seen so much turnover over the last couple of years, losing guys like Damian Baugh, Chuck O'Bannon, Jacoby Coles was huge. Micah Peavy was huge, right? Losing guys like that who do so much in scoring, but also in protecting the rim, in getting rebounds and getting assists, right? Defensively, right? TCU was really solid defensively last year and the year before, right? You're going to have to find a way to plug those holes, or at least make those holes not nearly as deep as they could be with so many guys leaving. And again, it just goes back to the fact that this is one of the youngest teams that I think Jamie Dixon has worked with in a long time. But with that said, if these guys can buy into what Jamie Dixon's trying to push here at TCU, if they buy into that plan and into that brand of basketball, you can not only have a great first season with some of these new guys, but you can also build that for the future seasons under this program.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of those young players, David Punch, Jace Posey, Micah Robinson, Isaiah Manning, all played significant minutes in this game, and their roles might increase or diminish as the season goes on, depending on how they play. But you did get a good look at what the future of TCU basketball will look like as well. And I like the youth wave. I think it's good. I think we need to start. We kind of have to start over now and start to build a program surrounding other players. And the expectation has certainly risen now at TCU with 3 straight March Madness appearances, and you know with how competitive the Big 12 is, it's going to be insane, right? I mean, the Big 12, with adding Arizona and adding all these teams now, I mean, this is the best conference in basketball, so you got to be able to hang in with the top guys, and you have to start building a program where you can build around certain players. So good to see those guys getting some reps and stuff. But yeah, I wanted to ask you, obviously we don't really know what's going to happen with this conference. We do know some of the powerhouses in Kansas and Houston and Arizona. Where do you see TCU kind of fitting in this conference? And Um, do you think that they can fit in the upper half of the Big 12?
I think they can. I do think that they can fit in the upper half, but it's going to kind of be a little on the outskirts. I don't think, you know, I'm trying to figure out exactly what the expectations are. Obviously, expectations are high no matter what, just because of what TCU's done over the last several years, right? But at the same time, you kind of have to curb those expectations, knowing that again, this is such a young team, it's such a different team. Obviously, you've got a coach who knows what he's doing. Um, some people play around and try to, say otherwise, but he's been here. He knows what to do. He knows how to develop players. And as the season goes on, you'll get a better sense for where this team will fall. But I think right now, and I said it all throughout preseason, but I think this team can be middle of the pack towards the top of the half of the conference. But it's just that breakthrough is just going to be incredibly difficult. It's going to be hard, right? And to that point, the key for TCU when it comes to conference play is win the games you're supposed to win, right? A team like this can't afford to lose games that they shouldn't be losing, because then you're going to come up against the Houstons, right? You're going to come up against some of those top teams, the Kansases, right? And those are going to be, hopefully TCU doesn't get shell shocked when they play those teams, but come that time, depending on injuries and whatever depth we see from this team, it could be a whole different story. But at least from the early going, I would love to see this team be in the middle of the pack or towards just kind of screeching into that top half of the Big 12, because I do think it's attainable, but it's very dependent on TCU doing their job in the games that they should be winning.
Absolutely. And it's a little bit of ways away, but the beginning of Big 12 play is an absolute gauntlet for TCU. You got at Arizona to start things off, who currently is the 10th ranked team in the country. You've got Kansas State, but then at Houston uh, on January 6th, on January 19th at Baylor. Then the following game, you're home against Kansas. End of the month, you've got Texas Tech. It is a very, very difficult beginning of conference play for TCU. And, but, February and March sort of lightens up. But, it's not ever going to be easy really at any stretch, but it does get a little bit easier. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be fun to watch, and certainly pleased with the way they played on Monday. Again, it's against Florida A&M. They're supposed to win, but there's definitely optimism and a lot of youth and on this team, and things to certainly be excited about. They will play. I believe their next game is on Friday against Florida Gulf Coast. Yes, this Friday at 7 p.m. at home against Florida Gulf Coast. They'll take on Texas State next Tuesday, and they'll have a matchup with Michigan. So we're kind of seeing Jamie Dixon. He kind of made they wanted their strength of schedule to be a little better in non-conference play because it kind of hurt them last season.
Yep.
So they'll have some more difficult opponents in non-conference play. But yeah, that'll kind of wrap things up for our men's basketball talk. Now let's move on to the women's, because again, there's a lot of optimism, a lot of excitement. Me personally, I'm a little more excited about this women's basketball team. We know what they did in the transfer portal, right? They bring in Hailey Van Lith, they bring in Maddie Schur, they bring in Donovan Hunter. Lots of talent that they brought in through the transfer portal, but they also stayed strong with their core and a lot of their scoring from last season with bringing back Madison Connor and Sedona Prince. So last night they played their first game of the season against Houston Christian, winning 78-41. Hailey Van Lith and Sedona Prince combined for 50 of the 78 points scored in this game. It was literally only them for like the first half. I think they might have scored 2 points outside of Sedona Prince and Hailey Van Lith. It was a dominant win for TCU. And I guess we'll go into that game a little bit. Uh, what did you see? Might be a little. What did you notice from that game?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a slow start. I mean, definitely start there, right? I think when I logged on and started watching, I did not expect to see it be 2-1 after 5 minutes. But it takes time. Again, this is a very new team, but like you mentioned, they've stuck with their core. But no, I mean it's good signs to get this win. The shooting wasn't fantastic, especially in the early going, but TCU found a way, obviously, with the strength of Sedona Prince and Hailey Van Lith. But you look at this team, and the first thing that I just that immediately pops out is depth, right? Talented depth as well, right? You have a starting five, at least from last night, with Sedona Prince, Hailey Van Lith, Madison Connor, Donovan Hunter, and then Taylor Bigby. Donovan Hunter and Taylor Bigby, two very, very exciting talents that have now come to TCU. But then you look at the bench and you see Alia Roberson, Una Jovanovic, Kanisha Godfrey, Deja Turner, right? And not to mention Maddie Sure, who didn't even play last night because she's dealing with a bit of an injury. You look at that and you've got to say, like, this bench could be its own starting five in its own right too. And so I think TCU has a fantastic ability to really create one of the best benches and best kind of depth spots going into conference play and throughout this season. It's really all just, once again, going to come down to health, right? And yeah, I mean, it's so far, I think the team's looking very strong for the season, but it's going to come down to the health as you progress. I've talked to some folks after the game last night, and there's a little bit of worry that last night it was really the Sedona and Van Lith show. But then again, last year a lot of the points came from Sedona Prince and Madison Connor. So it's just natural that, look, there's going to be a couple folks here on this team that are going to be the primary scorers, right? Doesn't mean that the other players aren't going to play a pivotal role. But it's a very exciting time for women's basketball, and for them to get this win to start off strong. Sedona did kind of take a bit of a shot there at the end, but she got up, seemed all right. But you just hope that this team can stay healthy throughout this long season.
Yeah, that was obviously a massive issue and took uh, storm last season was unfortunately just how many injuries, and it was picked up nationwide. Everyone was found out about this, and it was really unfortunate because that team had such a great start, undefeated in non-conference play, and felt like, yeah, this is a legitimate team, and then the injuries just hit them. But I think it's going to benefit the players that did come off the bench last night, Deja Turner and Una Jovanovic and Roberson, and the players that were getting heavy minutes during that time when those players were out. They're going to have to pivot in their role, but it definitely helped them a lot. And Mark Campbell mentioned that how much leadership and maturity that they were able to pick up in their time when they were starters during all that. So that's going to be a huge thing. As far as the depth thing, and just last night with it just being Hailey Van Lith and Sedona Prince, I mean, the team just struggled shooting from three, and that's
Yeah.
going to happen some nights. We saw how good they were from beyond the arc last season. I'm not going to see that performance last night from three and wave, bring up a red flag or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be nervous about that. I think they'll be just fine. Madison Connor just has to adjust a little bit in her role, and I think she's going to be huge for this team. And how nice is it that we can have not one but two players that can take a game over, and if the rest of the team is struggling, we at least have those two in Van Lith and Prince.
Yeah, and kind of to your point, right? We talk about depth, and you mentioned it, that last year for a lot of those players that had to come in and play in starting roles for much of the season because of injury, it's going to benefit them this year, right? They have so much more experience, and Mark Campbell knows Mark Campbell has seen them and their capabilities too, right? With that said, and this goes along the same lines of depth, right? But each of these players is going to have to change their mindset and their perspective on their role, right? It's going to be important. There's a lot of really good players on this team. Sometimes what comes with really good players are egos and certain things like that. So you got to make sure that, hey, everybody's here for the same reason. Everyone's trying to get this team to what they believe this team can reach, right? Um, I think you've got some really great veteran leadership, some great young talent too. And so, I think the message probably towards some of the players that are going to be more on the bench to start games, but are going to come in, it's look, you're going to have to know your role and play to your role, right? And Mark Campbell's a really good players coach. He's a great man manager, somebody that can you know, deal with different characters, deal with different play styles. He obviously, I mean, he's done such a great job recruiting these players. This isn't the first time some of these players have played together, right? Because of what he's done at Oregon, what he's done at Sac State. Um, so just really exciting for women's basketball and fingers crossed, knock on wood, cross your fingers, cross your toes, whatever, to have just a healthy season. Because TCU is really going all in on this year. Mark Campbell said it, and it's pretty clear that they are not looking, at least this last go around, that they were not interested in high school recruits at all. We're going to use the transfer portal to our advantage, and we are going to make a run for the chip. And yeah, and it's great to see that it's all starting here, and that really, I mean, this team, it will take some time to gel, especially for somebody like Madison Connor, who played such a pivotal role last season, to have somebody like Hailey Van Lith come in, right? It's might be stepping on her toes a little bit, right, in certain regards, but at the same time, I mean, as long as this team works toward the common goal and doesn't care who gets the credit, I think some really special things can be done here on the court at TCU.
Yeah, it's exciting to be excited about this TCU women's basketball team, especially where they were just 2 years ago at the bottom of the Big 12, struggling to even win a conference game. The fact that they are now legitimate contenders, not just in the Big 12, but hopefully in the country, and that they can make a run in March Madness and whatnot is unbelievable. And it just speaks to the job that Mark Campbell has done. To bring in someone like Hailey Van Lith, who has such a big influence on college basketball in general and is extremely well known amongst a lot of people, that what that's going to do for players that want to that are now going to want to come and play for TCU, it's going to help for years to come, I think. And just on the court, what she can do, she's an dynamic playmaking combo guard who can score, who can distribute, can really do just about everything that is required, and plays good defense as well. She is going to be really fun to watch at Schollmeyer this season. Very excited about Hailey Van Lith.
Yeah, it's a really it's a great balance of a new look team, but also a lot of good returners, right? And yeah, I mean, there's really not much else to say other than just it's nice to be excited for this team, right? Not to talk about football, but obviously with basketball starting, it's a new season, it's early on still, but it's great to see people getting excited going to games, right? I mean, I don't know what the attendance will look like for non-conference for both men's and women's, but when it comes to conference play, at least for women's, I definitely expect it to be a lot more and to see the Schollmeyer much more filled out than it has been in years past. And again, that's all credit, just like you mentioned, to the staff, right? To Mark Campbell, his staff, his recruitment staff, how they develop players, right? The fact that they've gotten to where they are 2 years removed from being one of the most struggling programs in a Power Five conference. Well, now Power Four, right? But now Power Four, maybe back to Power Five soon. But it's really commendable what this team has done, and you can't really do anything but sit back and root this team on, because it's a really special group of players and coaches that have been able to bring this team together to hopefully make it one of the best units in the nation. So
yeah, it'll be fun, and they're going to have some really tough opponents here in non-conference play. They'll take on New Orleans this Sunday at home at 2 p.m. But they're going to have matchups with NC State, who I believe made the Final Four last season, and then they're going to have a date with the reigning champs with South Carolina at Dickies Arena. So that's a huge matchup, and just kind of speaks to how competitive TCU thinks they can be, and they want to go up against the champs, and not many teams wanted to, but TCU is going to take on that challenge. Very excited for that game in non-conference play, and obviously the Big 12 should be fun to watch. But that'll wrap things up here for our little basketball episode. Very excited for both men's and women's basketball this season. Should be a lot of fun. But yeah, thank you for tuning in to Believe in TCU. You can follow us on Instagram at Believe in TCU. You can subscribe to our YouTube page and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, all at Believe in TCU. So for Ian Apician, I'm Zion Trammell. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time. And as always, go Frogs.